What if I told you you could change the world?
What if you believed it? What would you do?
I will change the world by using my art to educate people about climate change.
I can change the world by sharing my story to spark a change within the Turner syndrome community.
To make people view kids like me with autism differently.
I will change the world by inspiring others through my art to become creative change makers, one story at a time.
You don't have to be an expert to create change. You don't have to march in protest or organize a boycott. You don't even have to be a certain age or live in a big city.
We're here in Santa Monica, California, but you'll meet young changemakers from all over the world. See how their creativity is making an impact right now where they are. Come along with Discovery, Education, and Creative Visions.
Hi, I'm Jack.
And I'm Jonna. For centuries, filmmakers, musicians, and artists have sparked positive change through storytelling. It's called creative action.
Young people just like us are taking creative action to find solutions to the problems they care about. They're doing it in ways you may not have considered before, and they're having a lot of fun in the process.
You're about to learn how you can take creative action too.
You'll also find out how to overcome the challenges that can stop you in your tracks, like doubt and worry.
It doesn't matter if an issue affects 10 people or 10,000. If it matters to you, it matters.
Finding an issue that interests you is the first step in taking creative action. It could be something you've observed that is negatively impacting others, or it can come from your own experiences.
A personal experience is exactly what pushed Wesley Lauren to take creative action. He decided to change the narrative around mental health.
I'm passionate about mental health because up to this point it's the thing that's affected me the most in my life. Hi, I'm Wesley and I'm studying film at UCLA. A lot of us are dealing with a sense of disconnect. There's a lot of loneliness, and what comes with loneliness is often like depression, and I see that in a lot of my peers. So I feel that it's my duty and my responsibility to talk about these issues and to make creative work about these issues, because I feel that in doing that, I'm helping the people that I love. When I was first starting to suffer from my mental health disorder, I suffer from specifically intrusive thoughts, which is a symptom of OCD. And it basically means that I think in very obsessive, like cyclical patterns. Not always, but I can easily fall into those patterns. And I made this film in a way to explain to my parents what was happening in my head, because I felt like I couldn't express myself. It felt like my own brain was attacking me. So I would wake up and I would be thinking the same thought, and I would go through my entire day, almost every second of every day, every minute of every day, I would be thinking the same thought. And that was a really dark time for me. I would fall asleep counting to 100 in my head, playing loud music so I could fall asleep without hearing my thoughts, flashing lights in my room, just anything to get me out of my head. It was incredibly exhausting. When I was approaching the project, I wanted to get myself back into the headspace of the person who I was when I was going through this mental health crisis. I set up my phone on a tripod and I just went into it. It was very therapeutic. It was a form of almost video journaling, and in doing that I got to some really emotional places. The most important tool that I sort of developed during that time was my practice of meditation. It's probably the most important part of my wellness routine. It's what I do to clear my head, evaluate my thoughts in an objective, or as objective as I can be, manner. As far as my mental health goes, I find that if I surround myself with people who aren't really representing themselves to their highest potential or their honest potential, we all just kind of create these personalities that aren't really real. So when I'm looking for friends, I'm looking for people who are honest, genuine, authentic, and kind. And that's been very important for me. In making the film, it definitely felt like I was making myself very vulnerable. And that's not something I usually try to do, but I felt that it was necessary. And then upon completing the film, I felt like everything about me was just laid out in front of me, and now there was no way that I could be harmed with it. I think in the future, though, I want to make films that make the viewer feel as if they can rise up from wherever they are, from whatever circumstance they were born into. I want people to know that they are not alone, that life is worth fighting for, and that there's ultimately a place of peace that you can reach. I feel very optimistic about my life in general.
See? Creative action of any size is powerful. Whether it simply shifts a conversation, like Wesley did by removing the stigma of mental health, or sparks a change in a law or policy.
This is Dan Eldon, Kitengela.
My uncle Dan Eldon used his photography to highlight situations he cared about, and it did change policy. He was a champion of creative action long before it had a name. My uncle Dan was just 21 when he was working as a photojournalist in Somalia, trying to raise awareness about the desperate famine there that affected hundreds of thousands of people.
We're now on the outskirts of southern Mogadishu.
His photography led to a United States response called Operation Restore Hope. It brought aid and resources to the Somali people. Uncle Dan was killed in a riot covering the crisis in 1993, but his heart for doing good through adventures, art, and activism lives on in the work at Creative Visions.
Now, I want to introduce you to someone else who comes from a family of changemakers. Welcome, Isabel Roosevelt. Her great-grandmother was the former First Lady, Eleanor Roosevelt. Hey, Isabel. Thank you for joining.
Hi, thank you for having me.
How was your grandmother an agent of change?
So right now, we are living in a time where people have a passionate urge to change, and so many movements we can observe are connected to principles the Universal Declaration of Human Rights outlines for people to achieve. My great-grandmother was the first chairperson of the Commission of Human Rights in 1948, while the Declaration was being drafted and then adopted.
Wow. What's in the Declaration?
It has 30 articles outlining fundamental human rights and freedoms that are guaranteed to anyone regardless of sex, race, creed, or religion. The UDHR has civil and political rights like the right to free speech, education, and privacy. It also has social and economic rights like rights to social security, adequate housing, medical care, and work conditions.
Now, what inspires you to take creative action?
My great-grandmother once said that creative action starts with you. So I'm working on a short film series, exploring new places, meeting new people, and sharing their stories along the way. My next adventure is to South Africa, where I will be volunteering at a wildlife sanctuary.
Wow, that sounds awesome. Thank you, Isabel, for joining us.
Thank you.
You don't have to have a famous family member, know a celebrity, or have a Hollywood budget to amplify your voice. Remember, Wesley took creative action making a film in his room.
Filmmaking is just one form of creative action. Students are using dance, art, all kinds of writing, music, and even podcasts to raise awareness about human rights issues here and around the world.
I'm Jasper Elliott, and I take creative action without saying a word.
We are the Michael Slav kids, guru with the guitar from Afghanistan, and music is universal. Music is universal!
My name is Srini Hatamana. With creative action, I would want to ensure that people recycle their used batteries properly.
We envision a world in which periods are destigmatized, and every person in need of period care products can access them in a safe and affordable manner.
You know one of the best parts of creative action is? The meaningful change creative action ignites actually does more than change the world. Research has shown it increases the happiness of the person creating it. That's a win-win.
Speaking of research, that's step 2 in taking creative action. If you feel strongly about an issue, find out more about it. This can help you determine how you can contribute to a solution.
Creative action often leads us out of our comfort zone, but as changemaker Sydney Johnson tells us, that's where the magic happens.
Walk into the water, breathe, take up as much space as possible. Hi, my name is Sydney, I'm 17 years old and I'm a senior in high school. I've been writing poetry since I was in 9th grade. I started to get really conscious of how my mind works during that time, and I just really needed a place to funnel that expression. I think that it's very nuanced in the sense that you can write something and not have it be very direct and still have it reflect what's going on in your head, and not everyone has to get it. I wrote a poetry collection called How Big, How Blue to essentially work through my feelings about the ocean. Can you at least dip your toes in the water? I know you're worried about your hair, but can't you just keep your head above the water? The fear of water for a lot of Black people is passed down. My dad has told me stories when he was younger about going to public pools and being stared at like maliciously, and like it's kind of ancestral. What I was thinking about as I was writing the collection was the transatlantic slave trade and the amount of bodies that were thrown into the ocean. I think I work through being out of my comfort zone by taking inspiration from people who have come before me. The ways that I interact with books and authors that are very important to me kind of shows me that there is room for that feeling to be in you, and it's important and you can harness it into creative action. Those who can't go into the water because they were never taught to float, to rely on their bodies to breathe. I've also used creative action to support my friend's campaign. I had a friend named Mazi Lightor who was born in Ethiopia and was trying to expand the school in her hometown. Kids for Kalila was an art auction. We raised $122,000 for the school. I think working with friends was actually really important to the entire campaign. It's that kind of thinking where you kind of sit there and you're like, okay, what can a kid my age do? But we were really supported by everyone around us, like the adults, and I think that what I learned from the campaign was that you need to align yourself with people that have similar values as you, and you also need to make sure that you are really focused on what the needs of the community that you're trying to support are. Intuition is passed down, so is inexperience. We drown because we do not know how to be with water. I get told very often that I'm pretty quiet, but I think that it comes from a place of observation and a place of intuition, and so I think that using that intuition and observation for me when I'm taking creative action is really important, because I don't necessarily have to be the loudest person in the room. I just want to let my work kind of speak for me. I think it's really important to trust your own voice, because I think that's really where your humanity stems from.
Okay, so let's see if you're following along. What's the first step to take creative action? If you said find an issue that interests you, you're right.
Second, become informed. Research the issue. Ask questions to those already working on the issue and those impacted by it.
And the third step is to create an action plan. That's kind of like a campaign. An action plan involves deciding what you want to accomplish and figuring out how to achieve it.
Part of the plan is figuring out how you are going to share your message with the world.
Finally, decide to start. It could be a small start, just do something. It doesn't have to be perfect at first. We're filming this video in a small studio space. Sometimes creative action looks messy until it's finished. Now, if we're being honest, there is a side of creative action we should tell you about.
What's that?
It's the reason a lot of people don't go through with the great ideas they have. It's called imposter syndrome. A tiny voice in your head that says it's not good enough.
Yeah, but you've made 8 films. She's even won awards for some. I'm sure you don't have that problem.
Actually, I do. But I don't let it stop me from telling stories that help underrepresented communities see themselves in this world. I've been making films since as long as I can remember. I had always had a camera in my hand. So when my parents got a phone, I was always on that phone making little home videos.
Good luck, Santa Claus.
What I really love about filmmaking is the fact that you can tell a story so interactively. I can merge hearing and visuals together to create an emotion that other people can feel and also see and also hear. When people see my work, I want them to see themselves, and that's exactly why I created Color Fidelity, because I noticed when I was growing up there wasn't a lot of representation for people who looked like me. When I start to doubt myself in a project, I always start to kind of lose that project. Like, I'll put it on the back burner, or I'll start getting more disinterested in it. I guess my doubt manifests in procrastination. During the process of making Big Feelings, a film about feeling really big emotions and not knowing where to place them, and often feeling like you have to hide them, when I was finished, I was just making tons of excuses to not let it be seen. I think that sometimes it gets worse when I have a closer relationship to the project that I'm making. It feels like I don't want to put out something that I spent so much time on and it's so close to my heart and have it not be appreciated. Oh, that's perfect. Could you stay Despite feeling imposter syndrome, I know that I have to keep going in making my films because for me, telling stories is how I communicate and that's how I release. And I think that it's a beautiful thing to be able to connect with somebody over a story.
So Jonna, what can people do when they feel imposter syndrome creeping into their head?
You can get back on track if you focus on facts, not feelings. Celebrate what you've done so far. Let go of perfectionism. Learn from mistakes. Visualize success. And be kind to yourself.
We hope you realize you are every bit as capable and competent to affect change as anyone.
Thank you to Creative Visions, Wesley Lauren, Sydney Johnson, Isabel Roosevelt, and all our creative changemakers for sharing their stories. We hope they have inspired you to feel empowered and to make your own impact.
Be sure to check out creativechangemakers.org for more information. Thanks for joining us.
We can't wait to see what change you create.